Welcome to the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show, a broadcast service of globalbusinessnews.net.
This episode from the meeting room of Global TV Talk Show is brought to you by
The Bridge School, the accredited international online private school of choice, at bridgek12.org.
Porch Light Rental and Destination Services. Reduce your renter lump sum or managed relocation costs. Visit them at porchlightrental.com.
And by airs.com. With our full range of services, we can help design and manage your international relocation. Find us at airs.com.
Primestone Partners, featuring corporate, government, and developer housing solutions, as well as senior-level advisory services. Find them at primestonepartners.com.
And by International Auto Source. We are the vehicle experts for expats, featuring all major brands of automobiles with flexible solutions and financing. On the web at intlauto.com.
Become a global player in your field.
Cross Culture to Go provides virtual support for your global business and career success.
We can help you thrive in 140 plus countries and markets.
On the web at crossculturetogo.com.
Hi, it's Ed Cohen in San Diego, California, and today is June 15th. It's about noontime here, a beautiful sunny summer day. And welcome to Global TV Talk Show, a unit of globalbusinessnews.net. Globalbusinessnews.net has been around since '03, and Google Analytics, in their wisdom, has measured 1.2 million or so reader page views from over 100 countries. And since we started the Zoom TV talk show this past April 2020, as a result of COVID, closing down our live conference business, we've produced almost 200 broadcasts, and Google Analytics has measured 105,000 audience page views on our site since April 2020. So we thank you, and with gratitude. Thank you very much. Our special guest today is Jim McComb in the Los Angeles metropolitan area. Jim was one of fewer than 100 people to ever receive SMP, and that's the Strategic Management Professional designation. Let's welcome Jim McComb.
Thanks, Ed.
Yeah, welcome to Global TV Talk Show. So you and I have known each other, well, probably 10 years, but haven't seen each other for a couple of years. So tell us, first of all, as a matter of deeper introduction, self-introduction, what does SMP stand for, and to you?
Well, it's a professional designation that stands for Strategic Management Professional, and it essentially means that you have completed extensive education, extensive work with in that area, and perhaps as a senior executive as well in that area, which I was, and that you are qualified, frankly, to lead strategic discussions and strategic thought in businesses and nonprofits to help shape that strategy. And I actually combine strategic planning and management with risk management because I think they relate to each other very closely. So
well, you have a calling called wild card strategy, right? Now that's like a gambling thing, right? Poker.
Actually, I get confused a lot online with baseball because of the wild cards in the playoffs. But essentially what a wild card is it's an event or a technology or a change in thinking that hits you from out of the blue, was not on your radar screen, you were not expecting it. And it can be either positive or negative. It can impact your organization in a negative manner, or it can present an opportunity that you didn't see coming. So,
well, certainly a black swan, right?
Well, black swans are a little different than a wild card. A black swan is something that you still don't see coming, but you might have anticipated. For example, 9/11 was a black swan rather than a wild card because the towers had actually been hit several years earlier at another time. On the other hand, an example of a wild card that's about to hit the shipping industry is that there are teams in the world who have figured out how to teleport objects. And that's something that's not on anyone's radar screen right now, but will be in the years to come.
Teleport. Now, it's not like a drone picking up a UPS package. It's something different.
Nope. If you ever saw Star Trek and you saw Scotty beamed up, well, they're not beaming up Scotty. They haven't figured out the human aspect of it yet. But we actually have been teleporting data for several years now as a security alternative to when encryption is ultimately broken. But there are teams in the world that also have figured out how to teleport objects, which will have tremendous impact on the shipping industry when they can figure out how I can put the object in Ed Cohen's office instead of somewhere in the building he's sitting in, which is where that technology is now. So they're not really able to deliver it in the manner that customers will want, but that day's coming.
So in a bit of a background, you were a senior VP for a long time with Bank of America. You've been involved in West Corp, which is a large credit union. You've been involved in all kinds of firms at a senior level. So strategic risk management. And so we're talking about how to prepare or how to mitigate it once it happens, or to advance think it and then prepare.
Well, to advance think it and then prepare it. Most risk is uncertainty, and uncertainty is what all businesses have in common, no matter what it is you do. And the problem with conventional strategic planning is there's a SWOT analysis in every strategic plan: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. The problem with that is the things that wind up being analyzed are typically already in the mind. You heard a speaker talk about it, you read about it in the news or online. Something triggered you to say, okay, such and such is a threat, we should put that down in our analysis. Wildcards, however, in a recent example that dates back maybe a year or two, was when the trade wars started. All of a sudden, a lot of products were impacted by tariffs whose producers never in a million years expected tariffs to ever impact them. So the tariffs weren't even on their radar screen. And now all of a sudden, we're having to deal with that in our business. And so if you can forward think things like that and then have a way to prioritize what's most plausible and what's probably less plausible that may happen to you in the next 2 to 5 years, then you can begin to plan. And even a small business owner can do this effectively, because if they break the plan down into bite-sized pieces, they can just include it in their daily to-do list of managing their business. They can do one little thing that will advance them toward either insulating their business from a wildcard threat or being able to leverage an opportunity that they may never have seen coming.
So this kind of SMP, a strategic, this is a C-level thing. This is a CEO, or it's definitely a board, or the C. What is
definitely? Most SMPs are chief strategy officers. Some of them chief financial officers, because in a smaller company, the chief financial officer is the CSO also. But yes, definitely C-level.
So right now is peak season in the household goods business, particularly as companies are opening up and beginning to transfer employees again, all its trickle. but this is peak season, and what with the Suez Canal thing and driver shortages and COVID still impacting many areas, not so much here in California, but in other areas, particularly in Europe, it's a mess. This industry is being handcuffed, and nobody saw that coming.
And particularly, an aspect you mentioned with the drivers in so many industries. We saw the Colonial Pipeline situation actually exacerbated because there weren't enough drivers of fuel trucks that once they were back online to get that fuel out. And in the process that we use at Wildcard Strategy, we would have fleshed out something like that, because most risk is multifaceted, and with the drivers, at least one aspect of that is the additional unemployment that's been paid in some of the rescue packages has actually encouraged certain people, I'm not going to say necessarily drivers, but certain people not to return to work. So it's had an impact that no one ever expected, unless you go through an organized process that helps you think about all the possible outcomes. And that's where business people often fall short, not because they're not smart enough to think of those outcomes, but they're just too busy. And particularly in smaller businesses, you're just trying to keep the doors open. And so that's why people like me exist, is to help you with that.
Thank you for that. And now I want to turn our attention for a few minutes to this matrix that you've developed and that you've implemented. Okay, so let's go to the matrix. Is this something you invented, or you improved upon it from someone else's work prior?
I developed it while I was head of strategic planning for the largest division of Countrywide. And we actually used it to predict the 2008 meltdown 4 years before it happened.
So because of politics, I remember President Clinton pushed through a program to make it easy for people who normally wouldn't qualify for a mortgage to get a mortgage. And one thing led to another, and there was a bust.
Well, the government had an initiative called the Community Reinvestment Act, which actually was intended to help mortgage lenders serve those in underserved communities, give people an opportunity to own a home that, deserved that opportunity, but maybe hadn't had it up until the time that CRA was created in. So we did have a lot of people who were getting mortgages that, because the conditions went sour on them, it probably exacerbated the problem a bit more than it would have been without those opportunities being afforded to the underserved markets. But the fact of the matter is, we also had some fraud in the industry. Won't deny that. We had people packaging loans and selling them to the secondary market that probably shouldn't have been packaging them the way they were. But the matrix is designed to shape that brainstorming process that frankly would have helped us, I think, see some of the potential flaws in something like CRA and maybe address those before they had a chance to become flaws. And that's the beauty in wildcard management, is it gives you a chance before problems occur to anticipate them and to have a plan to mitigate them and hopefully even eliminate some of them before they ever become problems.
Well, It would have been nice to be able to foresee COVID closing down my conference business on February 27, and when I was in Washington, D.C., putting on a live meeting. And then I flew back from Reagan to San Diego on a plane that had hardly any people at all other than me and the flight crew. And boy, you knew something was coming. And then sure enough, 3 days later. And then, okay, so not only me, but thousands, maybe millions of people connected with travel and hospitality and meetings and hotels. And I mean, we're just, okay, now what?
Well, and when you look at just the convention business alone, every large city in America has to have just been crippled by the fact that conventions aren't coming to their city anymore.
Right.
Not only because of what it did to the hospitality industry, but all of you have caterers, you have florists who are delivering flowers for the tables at the conferences, and it's almost like when something happens in the movie industry, it just sort of mushrooms out, and people that you didn't even realize had anything to do with the movie industry or the convention industry all of a sudden are out of work because they've lost those opportunities. But that's what wildcard strategic planning helps you with, though, is if you are a company that was in the convention business. For example, one question that we'll ask during the brainstorming, and we relate it to the matrix, which we can maybe discuss a little more in a minute, but is we ask ourselves, what could possibly happen that would shut our business down? And then we go through the various parts of the matrix, one of which is health. We ask ourselves, okay, what relating to health could shut our convention support business down? And then we brainstorm. And, COVID is a wild card in a lot of people's imaginations. But for me, again, it's a black swan, simply because we actually had a chance to meet a lady who was like 5 or 6 years old when the flu epidemic in 1918 struck. So she actually went through both events.
Wow.
And now she's 105 or something. And she's talking to us about what it was like as a little girl. And so, and particularly living in the kind of world we live in today, where, there's bioweapons and even things that aren't bioweapons that just sort of happen by accident and, can cause medical emergencies. That shouldn't have been a surprise to us. And we have even less excuse for it to be a surprise now, because it will happen again. I don't know when, I don't know what the circumstances will be, but it will happen again, whether it's by accident or not. And we need to be prepared for that next time, meaning we need to learn something today from that. But, we obviously didn't learn after the first attack on the Twin Towers back in 1993, or maybe we learned and then we forgot. But, true wild cards are a little more rare, and most of the time they tend to center on just one or two sources of risk, technology certainly being one, because things can be invented just like that, and all of a sudden, boy, where'd that come from? And there are some technological things that are beyond imagination, and that's why I cite that teleportation so often, because anyone who is doing risk management of any type needs to have as their foundational principle that anything is possible. And we're possibly seeing that now. I don't want to lose credibility here with the audience, but we're possibly seeing that here now with the government finally saying, well, maybe some of these UFOs are UFOs. Maybe they do exist. I think people have to be ready for the day when we prove that. Now, I'm not saying I think that day is around the corner. I'm not even saying necessarily that, what I believe on this, but you have to be ready for anything if you're going to manage risk.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a timely announcement.
Hi, I'm Sergey Gorbatov.
I'm Angela Lane.
Together we are researchers, writers and practitioners in the field of human resources.
And we've also been multi-country, multi-assignment career expats.
We owe our professional development and growth to a very large extent to the international assignment opportunities that we have had.
But in a world where distributed work may become the norm, we also want to understand what will happen to the nature, duration, and purpose of international assignments.
Together with our colleague, Julian Dalzell from the University of South Carolina, we're undertaking a study on the future of expatriation.
And we'd value your contribution. You can participate in this important study by completing a simple 10-minute questionnaire.
Access the questionnaire by typing in your browser tinyurl.com/expert study. That's tinyurl.com/expert study. You can also find the link here on Ed's website next to this video.
Thank you for joining us in this study. In return for your contribution, we'll provide you with a copy of our research.
And of course, you'll be invited to an exclusive webinar hosted by Ed, where we will share our findings right here on Global Business News.
And so please go to tinyurl.com/expat study. Take the survey so that we can better understand the future of expatriation.
Something that's really neat is that the Bridge School partners with various organizations to provide learning for their students. For example, we partner with a major ballet company, and we are able to enroll several of their students into our school. So now not only is the student able to participate in a school and have a seamless transition while they're very active in their ballet career, but now they have other dancers that are with them that are doing some of the same courses. So it's almost becoming a camaraderie where they're taking similar courses, they're working together on their ballet, and really being able to form this great partnership with these organizations to provide a needed service. A lot of times there are student athletes who will spend hours and hours at the gym or at the basketball courts, wherever it is. And if they're attending a traditional school, they're in school from 8 to 3. They get a quick snack, and then they're at the gym for 3 to 4 hours in the evening. Coming to us and having that partnership, they're able to break that up throughout the day. They can have a morning practice, get some schooling in, have an afternoon practice, finish their schooling in the evening. So there's that flexibility. And additionally, if there are tournaments or performances, it's fantastic because if there's a week where they have shows straight through, they can take that week off of learning and then pick back up when they're done. So it offers this great flexibility. And for the program owners of these sports leagues, it is a win-win situation for them because they see this need. They see this need that their students need to make sure that they are obtaining the grades necessary to be successful adults in our country and in other countries. But it provides them an environment where they can be successful at both.
So let's talk about the risk and assigning values in the matrix, and how do where do you get the values from, and then what do you do with all that information? How do you interpret it? But before you do a deep dive on that, I'm really interested. But let me ask okay, we're in California, we're both in Southern California, and we know there's going to be an earthquake of some magnitude, maybe in 2 minutes from now, but maybe in 10 years from now, or who knows. So, I mean, what's going to happen? Pipes are going to break. The freeways are going to get stopped, if it's bad enough in a certain area, right? And so how can they be planning for that? Are they going to bring in, I mean, is the Corps of Engineers, Army engineers going to build a bridge over the crack in the freeway? Or, I mean, what's going to happen?
Well, hopefully there are groups of agencies at all levels of government now that are planning not only for earthquakes, but for other major, a solar flare that shuts the power grid down. There's all sorts of things. But if government is truly going to be responsible when it comes to disasters like this, there needs to already be a group that is planning every day and is working, relative to earthquakes, maybe is working closely with the earthquake center at Caltech and asking the questions of the experts. Okay, if there's an 8.8 earthquake, what level of damage is that likely to cause to infrastructure and all the aspects of our society? And in the event that occurs, what do we need to be prepared to do immediately? What do we need to be prepared to do within 24 hours, et cetera, et cetera? What it winds up being is a strategic planning process. You look at the end result. What is the end result we want? Well, we want to minimize loss of life. We want to minimize loss of infrastructure. And then you ask the question, okay, how do we do that? And there should be a group working on every one of those individual questions, because no one is going to be able to cover the entire scenario. And that's the approach that I take, and it's the approach I hope they are taking.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, just a wild and crazy, talking about Hollywood spectaculars, the Hoover Dam explodes for whatever the reason. All that water, assuming that there is water there, because of the drought. But
Lake Mead's at 37% now.
So that's amazing, isn't it? But there's still a ton of water there. And so it's going to all come down the Colorado River in a rush and flood Blythe. I mean, what can happen there? I mean, it's just craziness, right? And then what happens to our water supply after that? The after effect. That is a weird one.
They're already calling it the mega drought, and a lot of that, a lot of the potential crisis has been created because Phoenix has grown to be the 5th largest city in the United States. And it wasn't too many years ago that it was barely in the top 20. And then you have Las Vegas, which is part of that watershed as well, which has grown tremendously because of inexpensive real estate values a few years ago, allowed people to move in. And the mega drought, I mean, you can't call that a wild card now because people, in fact,
it's real. Yeah.
But again, government needs to be coordinating. The state governments involved and the federal government too should be in on it, but should be coordinating an effort today, yesterday, 10 years ago. They should have been doing that, because climate change is nothing new. If you look at the history of the world, it's a history of climate change. We've
right.
been cold, we've been warm, we've been wet, we've been dry. And people who have read about droughts know that California went through one, I think it was about 300 years ago, that makes this one look minor league. The problem is, or the good thing, I guess, was 300 years ago, there were a whole lot less people, a whole lot less demand on water. But what the matrix does is it has an axis across the top where I have laid out all of the external sources of risk and wildcards. External being things that you as a business person or a nonprofit leader can't affect yourself. So things like government, the economy, state of technology, the competitive environment, socio-demographic trends, and one that we've really seen occur recently, and that's changing consumer attitudes, opinions, and preferences. Consumer opinion has changed dramatically, and not just since George Floyd. It began changing, I think, with the Supreme Court decision on same-sex marriage, and even before that in some other areas. But just literally monumental change overnight in how people feel about something can be a risk to your business, depending on what your business is.
And the political, I can't even say it, but the politics out there have come into the boardroom, whereas in the past it's been common practice to say that's not our job. Let the politicians deal with it. But now it's impacting the companies, because the companies are the customers and employees. So, for instance, not so much same-sex marriage as like who cares anymore, but well, a lot of people care, but not as much. But let's just say pollution, all right, and then the real live thing of not just diversity and inclusion, but belonging, and not just ignoring once they're inside, and there's all kinds of aspects of that are elemental. But in America, the demographics are changing for sure, and how companies are dealing with that is a major problem, and there's no ready answer. But in the matrix, how would you assign a number? I guess it's a number assigned, right, across the top and then down, and then you come up with a solution somehow?
The numbers come a little bit later. The external sources across the top, internal sources run down the left-hand side, and those are things like your product line, your customer base, your business model, your mission and vision, your supply chain. In other words, all the things that are internal to your business or nonprofit that have where you have some degree of control over, what products you offer, or what customers you decide to target, or which delivery channels you decide to use, or how you decide to position your product in the marketplace. Those are things that you decide as a business owner or a management team, as opposed to what's on top, where others are making the decision and saying, okay, you will follow this law, or you will pay this tax, or you will compete with this competitor who's just entered the marketplace. And what the intersection is when we start the brainstorming, we ask, and let's just take technology for an example, and let's take the customer base. We ask the question, what would have to happen in technology relative to your product or service that would immediately eliminate your existing customer base. So then people begin to think about that. Okay, what could be invented? And, if you come back to teleportation, the day someone perfects that and you're driving around in an Amazon van, you now have a van you no longer need. You have an employee you no longer need. And what are you going to do about that? And so that's how we start the brainstorming discussion. And then as we work through the matrix, looking at the intersecting things. So in other words, there's a point at which technology in the matrix intersects with every one of the internal sources of risk that you've decided to identify and put in the matrix. And so you're asking the question for each one of those internal sources, what's going to have to happen with technology? And sometimes we'll ask both sides of the question. What's going to have to be invented to allow you to own the market, to be as successful as you want to be, because you own the market? What's going to happen? And, Apple in their little secret lab that they have is asking that question every day. And the key, and I think it's why some companies are so incredibly successful, is when they ask that question, it's not just about their product or service. They ask it in terms of, what do people want their lives to look like tomorrow? Right now, what do they want their lives to look like tomorrow in all aspects? And we began to do that when I was at Countrywide. We got out of just our mortgage thing and just began to think about life in general and lifestyle in general when we were asking those questions. But now to get to the number, so I can get your question answered quickly here. What we do after we've brainstormed a list is we step back and look at the list, and the planning team, whoever's in the room, picks what they think the 5 most plausible wild cards are going to be in the future of that business or nonprofit, say in the next 2 to 5 years. And we do it independently first. So Ed does it personally and picks 5. McComb does it personally and picks 5. Todd Lester does it personally and picks 5. And then we come back and we see where we agree. And generally, if you've got a planning team, a management team of say 6, 8 people, you're going to see 3 or 4 pop up on most of the lists as most plausible. And so while we don't necessarily assign a number, we are still picking, well, what are our priorities going to be? Because we obviously can't address everything. So we're going to look at the things we think are most likely to probably happen in the next 2 to 5 years in our company or our organization. And we also try generally to include at least a couple of opportunities. Opportunities are harder for people to see because somehow our minds are just geared to want to solve problems. So the problems bubble up to the surface, and what are those wild card threats going to be? But we do try to brainstorm opportunities as well, because one thing I found is that when you put an opportunity or two on your plausible list, those things sometimes become reality simply because you began planning for them. But if you hadn't, if you weren't thinking about it and you weren't planning, they never happen. Positive things happen to your business when you think of them and say, okay, we're going to plan for that.
Yeah. So if what I'm about to say causes alarm or like it, just deflect it and distract me. But let's go back to 2008 and the financial crisis and how what we know of as public, and I don't have any inside info at all, but how the Federal Reserve and all the big guys around the table at that time, how they didn't throw money at certain things, threw money at other things, changed the rules so that the mergers could happen, like with Countrywide and I don't know, whoever took them over.
Bank of America.
Yeah, okay. And so many other things. Home Savings of America. We used to think that was rock solid here in California, right? With that family that started it. But and then now with the recent Federal Reserve action, totally different, seemingly totally different. Open the floodgates, buy stocks of companies secretly and prop them up, and that's created the stock market cushion. And then throwing more money, and Bernie was called a socialist, and then all of a sudden they just changed the name. But it's all of that throwing money at everything and taking care of people, which is probably a good idea, but all of that's changed. So was the matrix done differently?
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I'm sorry. Was the matrix done differently? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So was the matrix organization by the geniuses at the Fed? But I mean, did they look at things differently than 2008?
Well, and I'm only guessing here because I wasn't at the table, but I think they are looking at things differently. And what makes me say that is that I think the country is looking at things differently today. And whether that's right or wrong, I'm not here to pronounce, but I think there is a different feeling in the country today as far as caring for others. Now, that has to be balanced by understanding how the economy works. And I myself am concerned when I see, $6 trillion packages, because I have a 35-year-old daughter, and I've got an 11-year-old step granddaughter who I care about, and they're going to inherit a lot of this. And the thing is, most people in the country don't truly understand how the economy works. And I'm not going to sit here and say Jim McComb does, because certainly a lot of aspects of it I don't understand either. But it's complicated. And when we became truly a global economy, it got complicated even more, because now something that might happen on the floor of a stock exchange in Japan or China or somewhere else now impacts us, even though it's not necessarily happening on the floor of our stock exchange, and vice versa. Something happens here, impacts somebody on the other side of the ocean who wasn't part of that decision. And so with all those moving parts, if I was advising government today, I would just say, go a little more slowly. Go a little more slowly. I mean, take care of the emergency spots where there's a fire burning and we need to put it out, but proceed a little more cautiously, because you have the future of others in your hands now. And that's why this whole topic of preparing for wild cards is so important, because what we're really doing is we're preparing the future to be less of a shock to those who will still be here when the future happens, even though a lot of us won't be. And I think we owe it to every generation that's on the planet now, and even some that haven't arrived yet, to really think these things through. And it's not only economics. I mean, certainly climate change is on that list. And Hunger is on that list. So there are many, many things that we're trying to deal with now, but I just don't think we always stop and consider the questions that we ask ourselves in wildcard strategy management. And those three questions are, do we believe anything is possible? And government needs to ask that question over and over and over. And not just anything on, are there space aliens, or can you teleport a box of, Harry and David's fruit to somebody? The questions are a lot more involved than that. But first of all, can we believe anything is possible? Second, what would it take to completely destroy society as we know it in this particular area on the matrix? And what would it take to be the best society we possibly could be in this particular intersection on the matrix? And for them, what's across the top of the matrix will probably be the same. What's down the left-hand side will be different, because rather than aspects of a business, it'll be aspects of society. But this is the most critical thing we can do. And I've always been confounded by the fact that virtually every government agency has a strategic planning department and a head of strategic planning. But one government agency that doesn't? The White House. And it's not a Democratic thing, it's not a Republican thing, it's a White House thing. And why there's no White House Office of Strategic Planning, I will never know. But there needs to be, because that's where the coordination is going to occur with all the cabinet departments and all the agencies, and I would even bring business in. Some presidents over time have had councils of CEOs come in, and we have talented people in this country who are in business, who need to be sitting with the president, regardless of who the president is, need to be sitting with the president from time to time, just talking about the future and how to prepare for it. And maybe it's just an inherent flaw in our form of government that every time the White House changes, we got to jumble everything up and completely start over. And that, I think, is a problem with government in general, even at the state level, because there's no continuity. And we've got to figure out a way, not only how you establish continuity when the party doesn't change, but how you establish it, even more importantly, when the party does change. There needs to be some kind of overall strategic vision for the United States. And until there is.
Thank you for that. Seriously, thank you for that. The matrix understanding. So let's move on and tell us about your book that's in development.
About the book?
About your book, yes.
Okay. The book essentially explains the wildcard strategy management process. So it obviously features the matrix and tells people how to use it in their own business, their own, government agency could use it. Certainly nonprofits I've mentioned. And actually, if you want to use it for your personal life, frankly, the principles still apply. What do you want to see for the end of your life in terms of what does your retirement look like, or what is the ultimate in your career look like? I mean, we all have moments when we think about those various aspects. What do we want our health to be like, our finances? And you can use this process, to just kind of do a little personal retreat and identify the wild cards in your life.
So Todd Lester sends a message. How many organizations would you say have a strategic planning department or person? I think you've addressed that somewhat. How would you sell an organization on adding that position? And are you able to quantify the value of that position before an incident happens?
Okay, I think there was 3 questions there, so let me take them in order.
Okay, just to review, I'll pull them back up. How many organizations would you say have a strategic planning department or person?
I would say it's probably a formal department or director of strategic is probably limited maybe to like the Fortune 1000, or maybe the number's bigger than that, but there are a lot of companies that kind of combine that function with like the CFO or someone else. But I would say the number is small, and definitely not in small business. Now, you do have some small business owners, you do have some small business presidents or CEOs who have a personal interest in that. So they do spend more time on it because it's of interest to them and they recognize the importance. Okay, the second question was, how do you sell?
Yeah, how would you promote this to a CEO or board that they should add this specific position and fund it?
Okay, I would simply ask the board, do you have a vision of the future? The board and the CEO. CEO is on most boards, so it's going to include that person. But do you have a vision of the future? And most, I think, will say yes. And then I will say, are you satisfied with the progress you're making to achieve that vision of the future? I think the answer to that will be more mixed. Some will say yes, some will say no, some will say, I really don't know if we're making any progress or not. Because there literally are organizations out there with strategic plans that don't report regularly to the board on progress. Maybe it's once a year if they're that lucky. So I would simply say, if you truly want to be where you said you want to be, by the date you've said you want to be there, 5 years from now, 3 years from now, whatever the number is, then and you're making progress, then maybe you don't need one. If you're not making progress, there's your answer. You need someone who comes to work every single day committed to taking you to the ultimate destination you want to arrive at. And in a lot of companies, that's the CEO. The president is the COO, and the CEO is the strategy person who is supposed to be driving that. But the key words there are supposed to be. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. And in terms of funding, I would say if you have defined a vision that for you is the most important thing this company is going to do in the next 3 years or 5 years, then it's worth allocating some money to make sure it happens.
Good, thank you. So what about like right now, the big question is, in my opinion, people and work from home or bring them into the office and how to deal with all that. So this is the role of HR, isn't it? I mean, an HR executive, not a middle management, but this is not a strategy thing. This is tactics, right? And so how do you deal with people who don't want to come back or reluctantly will, and they're going to be nervous about talking to anybody or riding the elevator or whatever?
Well, first of all, I believe that a big mistake a lot of companies have made is considering HR to be tactical and not strategic. And they've compounded that mistake by not putting the chief human resources officer in the C-suite. Because when you think about your most important asset in any company is the people. It's not the building, it's not the Amazon van, it's the people. And if they're the most important, and they're the ones that earn you the money that the finance department talks about, and they're the ones that create the product that the marketing department sells, there would be no company without the people. So got to establish that first. And that HR function is strategic, because what we're finding out now is because we didn't do adequate what if planning about something like COVID. And we actually did plan at Countrywide for a scenario like that. And I think other companies probably did too, but because America in general didn't do adequate planning in its business, we never anticipated that a rescue plan could contribute to keeping people at home. Or without the rescue plan, a lot of, I've read, particularly women have decided not to return to the workforce for various reasons, but we could have anticipated those things if we had only thought about it even 5 years ago or even 10 years ago. But if I were running a company today and I was trying to attract employees, whether they were people who were technically still part of my business or they were people I was trying to win over, is I think what you have to do is you have to create a vision for the future of that business that includes every employee. And when you place an ad or go to a ZipRecruiter or someplace like that and ask somebody to become part of your company, I think part of every job description should be, here's how this job is going to be part of our vision for the future of this business. And here are the opportunities you have by coming to work here, maybe just filling this particular job now, but there are going to be opportunities here to be part of something much bigger. And that's what we want you for. And I would be recruiting for two things that I don't think a lot of businesses recruit for today. Number one is I would recruit for my culture. And I mean corporate culture. I don't mean, culture in terms of like a country's culture. But if I want to have a culture that truly is customer centric, then I'm going to know what kind of traits I'm looking for in people who care about other people. And when I interview, I'm not only going to be interviewing for skills, but I'm going to be interviewing for those traits, I guess, for lack of a better word. I need to think this through a little bit more, but I'm going to, and we've seen it in some businesses where employees, when you thank them for something, they say, "It's my pleasure. I'm happy to do it." You don't hear that in every business. And I'm sure in businesses where people really don't want to say something gooey like that, they're not going to go to work there. But if they truly care about people and they want to serve people, then they don't mind saying something like that. And, it's going to be different in every business, the kind of values and things you're searching for. And the other thing that I think makes HR strategic that I would be interviewing for is not the skills you necessarily have today, but I'd be asking you about the skills you want to acquire. Who do you want to be in 5 years? What do you want to know that you don't know today? What do you want to learn? What do you want to be able to do that you can't do today? And I think if you provide some of those opportunities, then you wind up a winner in two ways. First, you give that person something to strive for. And secondly, you wind up with a workforce that's got tomorrow's core competencies. And
And the people who
I
want
would try to win
try to
people
get
back.
there. Yeah. But we're talking with Jim McComb. He's got a book coming out soon, Certain Success in an Uncertain World, How to Survive and Thrive in a Disruptive Future. This has been an MBA course talking with you, Jim McComb. Thank you.
Well, I'm honored to be here with Ed Cohen. I've known him for a number of years, and boy, there is nobody better to host a show like this than Ed Cohen.
Gift of gab, eh? So Jim McComb can be found on LinkedIn. And what's your website?
It is being redone by yours truly right now. It is www.wildcardstrategy.com, and give me about another week, and you'll see the updated version.
All right. Thanks for being on Global TV Talk Show. And we welcome you back. Let's get to the next chapter.
Okay.
Thanks,
Ed.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye, Todd.
Thank you for joining us in the meeting room at Global TV Talk Show.
Have a wonderful day, and stay safe.